fun with his life, this kind of bothered me. Because by the time I was around 20, and I'm 36 now, I was coming to the grips with the fact that this really had happened to me. But despite what seemed like a lot of negativity, I still wanted to believe that they were the good guys. And part of that is because I wanted to believe that I was special. I wanted to believe that I was chosen, or that there was some great cosmic scheme behind why these beings had done these things to me. And I especially want to know who they were, what they were, and to get to the bottom of it. And it really was more than an intellectual curiosity. It's kind of life and death, in fact, because I found it's hard to seriously plan your life ahead when you know something of that magnitude can and most likely will interrupt your plans. Like, for instance, it's hard to be dating a girl, for instance, that you might like to marry one day, and then you've got to wrestle with whether or not you're going to be an honest, forthright person and tell her these things that you believe to be true about yourself at the risk of her dumping you because, well, obviously you need some help. Or do you keep it a secret and don't tell her or anybody, because then you're knowingly and selfishly bringing someone that you claim to love into an experience and your whole family that you wouldn't really wish on your worst enemy. So I've already seen the heads nodding. There's a couple people here I know that can relate to that, but just without any details, I went the honesty route on that one, twice in fact, and didn't work out. Here I am still single. But that's honestly the snag I think I ran into in my want to believe in the creature's good intentions. The snag that I would run into is deep down, at least on the inside, I'm basically an honest person and not necessarily a good person, and I can lie to myself, but sooner or later I'll just get alone with myself and face facts. And when I was around 21 or 22, I took a more than one good hard look at my life and the visitors in my life, and I just finally decided they didn't have my best interests at heart. My experience-based, honest belief back then, before ever studying out what anybody else was really saying, was that they were just up to no good. And I wasn't a Christian then, so when people would use the word demons to describe the aliens, I wasn't real receptive, as most in the UFO community understandably aren't. And I still don't think that's the correct terminology anyway, but I can see why so many Christians do arrive at that conclusion, as I did later on. But I felt that I was dealing with something evil anyway, and that I didn't want them in my life anymore. That's about age 21 or 22. And I wanted nothing more really with my life at that point than to just walk away from researching all this crap and just get on with a normal life. And I wanted my life to be focused on other things. And we all know everything happens for a reason, and so there's synchronicity in the universe, and God is in control and all that. So what I probably considered a totally unrelated series of unfortunate events. About a year and a half later, after vowing to walk away from UFO and alien research, I somehow became a Christian. I still don't understand it myself, but I wasn't in a church. It wasn't an altar call. Just Jesus spoke to me, pretty plainly, in fact, and I've followed him ever since 1992. At that point in my life, I read the whole Bible in 4 months, because I never had. And I read tons and tons of books. I learned everything I could about everything I could. And I kept my own secrets on this stuff to myself. I trusted no one with my alien stories. But my own earliest studies into the biblical views of the spiritual realm in general, they led me to believe that what people all over the world were calling aliens were really demons. And just on my own, and keeping that promise not to talk about this to other people, I didn't even start watching like Star Trek, Next Generation, or The X-Files until 1997. That's how distanced I purposely wanted to be from this stuff. And I wasn't reading Christian books on it either. There weren't that many out then. But all on my own in the 90s, I developed a theory about how this alien deception was tied into what many denominations teach about the end times, about the New World Order, how UFOs were going to start appearing more and more and push people towards a one-world government, and how the aliens were going to be saying that they were here to help humanity survive the coming earth changes and the cataclysmic events, and once all the Christians were either killed or ejected off the planet, how they'd be here to help us usher in the new age of humanity by joining up with our galactic neighbors. Had all that figured out by 1993. At least I had it in my head, but there's honestly, pardon the French, there's just no way in hell I was going to write that down or give anyone any reason to wonder why I might even be interested in this topic, much less knowledgeable of it. So I went about my merry little respectable Christian life through most of the 90s. I started getting into some sales jobs, pursuing Christian education and training. I became part-time staff at a couple of churches that I was affiliated with in Nashville over the next few years, and so everybody thought the world of me, of course. I finally cleaned up and got respectable, sort of. And at the end of 1996, I was renting a nice little 3-bedroom house with my fine, upstanding Christian male roommate. I was working as a licensed stockbroker for a private company, selling oil drilling investments at $10,000 a pop over the phone to people whom losing $10,000 on a bad investment was actually good for their taxes. You know, that's what I was doing. Now, it sounds real exciting to you, I'm sure. But now that's a far cry from being some Bible-thumping lunatic out in the middle of the desert running an alienresistance.org and holding UFO conferences, I realize. But around 1990, 91, I'd walked away from just everything UFO related and convinced myself that I wanted a life very different from the one that I have today. It's just that simple. Honestly, I felt that I'd suffered enough, and I'd even been in church long enough to not want to be considered one of those UFO nuts that we all hear about these days, you know. So the obvious question is what happened, and it's Heaven's Gate happened in the 90s. You remember that, mostly. Excuse me. Strangely enough, I felt at the time that I let those people die through my inactions. And it's not just that they were dead, but the way they died by believing that their leader was Jesus Christ and that a mass suicide was the way to enter heaven. I knew that those 39 people were in hell also. I'm not going to even apologize for saying that, because I knew that they'd fallen victim to what the Bible calls deceiving spirits and doctrines of devils. Now I believe, through later research, that Marshall Applewhite was actually a mind control victim himself. I used to villainize him, and now I feel more compassion because I think he was a victim as well. But and I'm not really to blame for the deaths. I know all that. But in 1997, the simple truth for me was that I had a story, and over the years I developed a certain viewpoint that maybe one of those people might have been persuaded by to make a different choice in their life if I'd shared it with anybody. Maybe 2 would have, maybe all of them would have, maybe none of them. But I had in me, I felt, the research and the scriptural truth to confront the lies that killed them, maybe make a difference in their lives. And I've known for years that God was wanting me to share it, in fact, but I was just too in love with my fine, upstanding Christian life to do it, to put myself out like that. And a few of the news reported that some of the people in that group had found Heaven's Gate because of their website. And that fact just somehow intrigued me. I wasn't a tech person back then. My roommate had a computer. And one night I got that old AOL search engine kind of going. And my fingers like literally almost trembling. I kid you not, because this pristine little life that I'd really gotten attached to was kind of flashing before my eyes. And I typed in 3 letters, UFO. That's when my life changed. Part of me died, another part of me was born. It wasn't really a transformation. It was just owning up to who I was and what God was demanding of my life. Because a couple hours later, I'd really cried a little, partly for the Heaven's Gate victims, but partly for the numbers of people that I saw in the future were going to be deceived into thinking along those exact same lines. So I found out in 97 that deceiving spirits and doctrines of devils ruled the internet on the search term UFO. There wasn't even much legitimate information back then. At least you couldn't find it online, like the National UFO Reporting Center or MUFON. They didn't have great websites, and they weren't getting attracted. But Heaven's Gate the website had been already closed down by the feds, and other members that weren't part of the suicide had already put up a mirror site that was on the web, getting tons of traffic because of the news event. But it was still teaching the exact same lies that killed their leader and encouraged people to commit suicide on their own at home as a way of joining the away team that had already departed. You know, your chance is still there. And it's heavensgate.com. You can check it out. It's all back online now. But my main realization then was there's next to nothing online that gave an honest, coherent, biblical interpretation of the UFO phenomena. The sites that even mentioned the Bible were closer to Heaven's Gate and the Raelian religion, meaning that anyone who is even a little bit curious about UFOs, or especially spirituality, was likely going to be led into a UFO cult, or at least they'd be led into a false belief system, even if they didn't practice it publicly with other like-minded people in rooms like this or whatever. But the top match, #1 match